Hong Kong, Golden Harvest Studios, Stage 4, January 17, 1973, 3:22 p.m. The Colosseum set, stone-painted walls 30 feet high, sand floor 40 feet across, 4 industrial lights overhead running at full power, temperature inside the stage, 99 degrees Fahrenheit, 53 people on set that afternoon, 2 camera crews, director Robert Klaus in his chair behind monitor 1, 11 stuntmen in position along the east wall, 2 makeup artists near the equipment cases, 12 extras seated in the upper-tier bleachers. At the center of the sand floor stood Bruce Lee, 5'7", 135 pounds, white training outfit, 4 arms bare. He had been on this floor for 3 hours already. 11 feet away stood Bob Wall, 6'1", 215 pounds, black uniform, karate world champion, a man Bruce Lee trusted enough to cast in 3 films. In his hands, 2 real glass bottles, not props, not rubber, not safety glass. Real glass bottles, broken at the neck, jagged edges forward, held at shoulder height. The scene required Wall to charge Bruce with both bottles aimed at his chest. Bruce was required to intercept both arms simultaneously, a move that needed precise timing down to a fraction of a second. They had run it 6 times already. The 7th take started at 3:22 p.m., and what happened in the next 8 seconds, captured partially on camera, witnessed by 53 people, and never officially explained in any studio report, sent 1 extra to the hospital with a shattered arm, left the entire crew frozen in complete silence, and became the most dangerous 8 seconds in the history of Hong Kong cinema. 8 seconds. Nobody moved. Bob Wall was not hired because he was convenient. He was hired because he was dangerous, in the specific, credentialed way that Bruce Lee required from every man he put in front of a camera lens. Robert Lee Wall, 30 years old in January 1973. Born in Columbus, Ohio. Raised in San Jose, California. He had been training in martial arts since age 14, a span of 16 years by the time he walked onto stage 4 at Golden Harvest. His primary discipline was karate, and his credentials in it were documented and verifiable. Multiple national championships, competitive record in full-contact tournaments across the western United States, and a reputation in the martial arts community as one of the hardest natural strikers on the circuit. He stood 6'1". He weighed 215 pounds, functional, trained weight, the kind built across 16 years of contact sport rather than a gym. His hands were the thing people noticed, large, heavily calloused at every knuckle, the kind of hands that professional fighters develop when they spend years hitting things that push back. He was a friend of Chuck Norris. He was a student of Chuck Norris, in fact, having trained under him in the early 1960s before opening his own schools in California. He had appeared in Way of the Dragon in 1972, which was how he and Bruce Lee established the working relationship that brought him to Enter the Dragon the following year. Bruce Lee trusted very few people inside contact range with a camera running. Bob Wall was one of them. That trust had a technical basis. Wall could take real contact and sell it correctly. He could absorb a full-power strike from Bruce Lee and convert the impact into believable cinematic response without flinching early, breaking character, or pulling away instinctively. Most trained fighters cannot do this. The instinct to protect the body is ancient and strong. Wall had trained it down to something manageable. He could receive a real strike and perform the reaction the camera needed, a skill that was more difficult than it sounds, and rarer than the industry liked to admit. Bruce had used real contact throughout his career. Not always, not with untrained extras, not recklessly, but with skilled opponents who agreed to it and could handle it. The contact made the footage look different. Anyone who had seen enough choreographed fights could tell the difference between a strike that connected and one that stopped 2 inches short. Bruce Lee's films looked different because the contact was different. For the O'Hara scene in Enter the Dragon, the script required something specific and genuinely dangerous. Wall's character would attack with 2 broken glass bottles, jagged, real glass, while Bruce's character intercepted both arms simultaneously at close range. The choreography required Bruce to trap both of Wall's forearms in motion, catching them before the glass reached his body. If the timing was off by even a fraction of a second in either direction, the result would not be a missed stunt. It would be lacerations, potentially deep ones. Real glass was director Robert Klaus's decision. Klaus, who had a workable relationship with Bruce during production but would later have a falling out significant enough to color his accounts of the shoot, believed real glass read differently on camera than prop glass. He was correct about that. He was possibly not thorough enough about what real glass meant when it shattered on a sand floor and needed to be cleaned between every take, and what it meant to ask Bob Wall to fall on it repeatedly. Wall described it later in direct terms. The glass cut through 4 uniform tops during production. It cut his knees, it cut his back. He was falling on real shards after every take, and the camera never captured that part of it. He did not complain about this during production. He took the falls, he completed the takes, he understood what he had been brought there to do, and he did it. 6 takes had been completed before 3:22 p.m. on January 17th. All 6 were technically successful from the camera's perspective. Bruce intercepted Wall's arms. The bottles did not make contact with Bruce's chest. The scene worked. The 7th take was requested by Klaus for an alternate camera angle, a wider shot that would give the editing team more options. Wall's instruction for the 7th take was the same as the previous 6. Charge directly at Bruce's chest with both bottles raised, aim at the right pectoral, move as fast as possible. Bruce's instruction was the same, intercept both arms before contact. The only difference in the 7th take was that Wall had been doing this for 6 consecutive attempts in 99-degree heat, with real glass in his hands and real glass on the floor beneath him every time he fell. His speed had been increasing across the takes, not by decision but by the natural rhythm of repetition. The body learns a motion and begins to execute it more efficiently with each repetition. By the 7th take, Wall was moving faster than he had been on takes 1 through 6. He was moving faster than Bruce had calibrated for. Bruce Lee was 5'7" and 135 pounds. He had been training since age 13. 14 years of Jeet Kune Do development, 10,000 hours minimum. He had designed his combat framework around one central principle: the shortest distance, the least telegraph, the most efficient line. He was one of the most precisely calibrated human beings in contact sports on Earth. And on the 7th take, for the first time in 6 attempts, the calibration was off by the width of a hand. What happened next took 8 seconds. 53 people watched every one of them. Not one of them spoke for the 8 seconds that followed, and 2 of them would carry the weight of those 8 seconds for the rest of their lives. Director Robert Klaus called action at 3:22 p.m. The clapperboard came down, take 7. Stage 4 went into production silence, the specific total quiet of a film set the moment a take begins. 53 people who had been moving, talking, adjusting equipment, and drinking water all stopped simultaneously. Camera operators locked position. The 2 assistants at monitor 1 stopped writing. The 12 extras in the upper-tier bleachers who had been shifting in their seats throughout the afternoon went still. The production assistant closest to the sound recorder later said that in the 2-second gap between action and Wall's first movement, stage 4 was the quietest she had heard it in 3 weeks of principal photography. Bob Wall started his charge from 11 feet. His approach was direct, straight line to Bruce's position, no angle, no arc. Both hands raised to shoulder height, broken bottles forward, jagged edges catching the overhead light. He had done this 6 times. His body knew the distance, the timing, the foot placement on the sand that would put him in position at the moment of contact. He moved faster than the previous 6 takes. The difference was not dramatic, not something a stopwatch could have caught without slow-motion analysis. It was the difference that 16 years of muscle memory creates when a sequence is repeated enough times. The motion becomes more economical, the hesitation disappears, the speed finds its natural ceiling. Wall's natural ceiling, on a straight-line charge with both arms raised, was faster than Bruce had timed for. Tommy Leung, 28, the first camera assistant on camera 1, was watching through the viewfinder. His sightline was direct. He described the approach later to a production colleague. The first 6 times I could track him easily. I could see both bottles clearly the whole way in. The 7th time, by the time I registered he was moving, he was already halfway there. Bruce saw it. The precise moment Bruce registered that Wall's speed had increased is not in any document, but the response to it is observable in what happened next, because Bruce's response to unexpected timing was not hesitation. It was adjustment, immediate, automatic, routed through 14 years of training that had specifically prepared him for exactly this category of problem. A real threat at close range, moving faster than anticipated. He made 2 changes simultaneously. First, he shifted his stance. Left foot forward by approximately 3 inches, shortening the distance he needed to cover to reach Wall's arms. Second, He timed his interception earlier than the previous 6 takes, meeting Wall's forearms at a distance of roughly 2.5 feet rather than the approximately 18 inches he had used in takes 1 through 6. The interception connected. Both of Bruce's forearms hit Wall's forearms simultaneously, a crossing trap that stopped the inward motion of both bottles at the same moment. The contact was real, full force, the kind of impact that produces a sound that cameras pick up differently than choreographed contact. Sound on stage 4 at that moment, a sharp double crack, both forearms making simultaneous contact in under 1/10 of a second. Wall's forward momentum, 215 pounds at full charge speed, was stopped and redirected laterally by the interception. Physics required it to go somewhere. It went sideways and backward. Wall went with it. His body rotated left under the force of the redirected momentum. His right foot came off the sand. He went into a fall, backward and to the left, that was faster and more forceful than any of the previous 6 takes. The bottles left his hands. The right bottle, the one nearest to Bruce's body on interception, spun away to the left. It hit the sand floor 7 feet from the point of contact and shattered. Real glass. 31 fragments, later counted by a crew member during cleanup. The left bottle traveled differently. It went right, directly toward the line of stuntmen positioned along the east wall. 11 men, spaced approximately 3 feet apart. The closest stuntman to the point of contact was Danny Way, 24, who had been standing in position for 40 minutes. The bottle did not hit Danny Way. It hit the stuntman 2 positions to his left, a man named Luke Chun-fan, 31, who had been on the Enter the Dragon production since week 2 of principal photography. Luke Chun-fan raised his right arm instinctively. The bottle hit his right forearm at close range. It did not shatter on impact with his arm. The neck of the bottle, the thicker section, still intact, struck the forearm at the midpoint between wrist and elbow. The sound was different from the bottle hitting the sand floor. It was a single, dense impact, the kind that people who have heard bones break describe as immediately recognizable. Luke Chun-fan's right forearm fractured on contact. He did not shout. He made one sharp exhale, audible to the 3 stuntmen nearest to him, and stepped backward into the wall. His right arm dropped. He held it against his body with his left hand. Robert Klaus said cut. The clapperboard operator wrote the time, 3:22 p.m. The entire take, from action to cut, had lasted 8 seconds, and then stage 4, Hong Kong, Golden Harvest Studios, 53 people, 2 camera crews, 1 director, 11 stuntmen, 12 extras, 2 makeup artists, 1 production assistant, went completely silent. Not the silence of a take beginning. Different silence. The silence of 53 people processing what they had just seen, trying to file it in the correct category, and finding that no correct category existed for it. 8 seconds of shooting, 1 man down, 31 pieces of glass on a sand floor, and Bruce Lee standing at the center of it all, completely still, looking at the east wall. He had not moved since the interception. He had not taken a step back, had not looked at the camera, had not looked at Klaus. He was looking at Luke Chun-fan. His expression, described by 4 separate crew members in 4 separate accounts, was the same in all 4 descriptions. Not panic, not guilt, not performance of concern, focused, completely, quietly, dangerously focused, like a man doing a rapid and thorough calculation. The crew would not understand what he was calculating until he moved. The silence after Klaus called cut lasted 8 seconds by 2 separate counts. Jenny Chan, 26, the second makeup artist, counted it. She was positioned near the northwest equipment cases with a direct sight line to the center of the floor and the east wall. She counted because, as she later described it, she needed something to do with her mind while her body stayed frozen. I couldn't move. My feet wouldn't move. So I counted. 1, 2, 3. I got to 8 before anyone said anything. David Locke, 33, the second camera operator, also counted. He had been at his station near the south corner. His count matched Jenny Chan's, 8 seconds, beginning from the moment Klaus said cut. 8 seconds of total silence on a working film set with 53 people in it. To understand what those 8 seconds contained, it helps to understand what the crew had just processed in the 8 seconds before them, the take itself. In 8 seconds of filming, they had seen the following sequence. Wall's charge at full speed, Bruce's simultaneous 2-arm interception, the crack of forearm-on-forearm contact, real, unambiguous. Wall's 215-pound body redirected laterally by the force of that interception. 2 bottles leaving Wall's hands, 1 bottle shattering on the sand floor, 1 bottle traveling in a straight line toward 11 stuntmen against the east wall, a raised arm, a single impact sound, a man stepping backward into the wall holding his arm. 8 seconds of film at 24 frames per second would have captured 192 individual frames of that sequence. No camera captured what happened in the 8 seconds of silence that followed. What it contained was this: Bruce Lee did not move for the first 3 seconds. He stood at the center of the sand floor, feet at shoulder width, hands at his sides, eyes on the east wall, specifically on the position where Luke Chun Fan had stepped back. His breathing was visible, not rapid, not panicked, but deliberate. The kind of breathing a trained man uses to keep physiological response from becoming physiological override. He was looking at the injury. The assessment lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then he moved. He crossed the sand floor in 7 steps, distance from his standing position to the east wall, approximately 22 feet. He covered it in under 4 seconds. Not running, moving. The distinction matters. Running signals panic, moving signals purpose. He reached Luke Chun Fan at approximately second 6 of the silence. He placed one hand, left hand, open palm, on Luke's right shoulder, not grabbing, supporting. A contact that communicated stability without applying pressure. He looked at Luke's right forearm. He did not touch it. He looked at it for approximately 2 seconds, directly, without flinching away from what he was seeing. Danny Way, standing 2 positions to Luke's right, observed this from 3 feet. He described it later. Bruce looked at the arm the way a doctor looks at something, not scared, not sorry in a theatrical way, just looking at it and deciding what it was. At second 7, Bruce looked at David Leong, the first assistant director, positioned near camera 1. He said 1 sentence, 3 words: "Get a doctor." Not shouted, not urgent in the way panic produces urgency. Directed. The sentence of a man who has completed his assessment and is issuing the appropriate next instruction. That was second 8. Then Jenny Chan moved. Then David Locke moved. Then the production assistant near sound moved. The silence broke in layers, the way a film set restarts after a cut. First one person, then another, then the whole machine resuming. David Leong had the studio medic on the radio within 45 seconds. The medic was inside stage 4 within 3 minutes. Luke Chun Fan was transported to Queen Mary Hospital, Hong Kong, within 11 minutes of the take ending. His diagnosis: a closed fracture of the right radius, the midpoint of the forearm, consistent with the impact location. Estimated recovery: 6 to 8 weeks. He did not return to the Enter the Dragon production. What happened on stage 4 in those 8 seconds, the take plus the silence, became the incident that the production absorbed in the way productions absorb things. It was filed, processed, and continued past. The shooting schedule showed a 40-minute gap on January 17th starting at 3:22 p.m. It noted medical delay. It said nothing else. But what the crew carried out of stage 4 that afternoon was not nothing. It was a specific piece of information that none of them had held before 3:22 p.m. The information was this: Bruce Lee's interception, the 2-arm trap that he had choreographed, rehearsed, and executed 6 times without incident, was powerful enough that when a 215-pound man's full charge momentum was redirected by it, the resulting force sent a glass bottle on a trajectory that fractured another man's arm from 7 feet away. Not a strike, a deflection. The force of a defensive move applied to an object in an attacker's hand, traveling through the air and breaking a bone in a third person standing 7 feet from the point of contact. That information sat inside 53 people for the rest of the day. Most of them did not discuss it immediately. Carol Fung, the production assistant, wrote in her daily log that evening, "Nobody talked about it at dinner. I sat with 4 crew members. Different people came and went. Nobody brought up 3 p.m. I think we were all still filing it. Still filing it. The correct drawer had not been found yet for what they had seen. It would take some of them weeks. It would take Bob Wall a 3-hour conversation on a flight back to Los Angeles to find his. And it would take Robert Klaus, the director who ordered real glass and faster takes, a version of Never. The 40-minute gap in the January 17th schedule was recovered by working through the afternoon's final lighting setup faster than planned. Robert Klaus resumed shooting at 4:06 p.m. Different scene, different area of the set. The sand floor of stage 4 had been swept and re-raked by 2 crew members during the medical delay. The 31 fragments of the right bottle had been collected and disposed of. The left bottle, the one that had hit Luke Chun Fan, had been removed by the medic as part of documenting the injury. The cast and crew on the 4:06 p.m. setup were largely the same people who had been in stage 4 at 3:22 p.m. They worked. Film productions work through things because the alternative, stopping, costs money at a rate that the production cannot absorb. This is not callousness. It is the operational reality of a machine with a fixed budget, a fixed schedule, and a completion deadline that does not move for most circumstances short of catastrophic injury or death. Luke Chun Fan's fracture was serious. It was not catastrophic by production standards. The medic had assessed it, transport had been arranged, the injured man was receiving care. The production continued. What did not continue normally was the conversation, or rather the absence of it. Alan Tang, 35, the production's head stuntman coordinator, had been on the east wall during the take. He was 4 positions to the right of where Luke had been standing, approximately 12 feet from the impact point. He spent the 4:06 p.m. setup in his normal working position, coordinating the afternoon's remaining stunt sequences. He did not mention the 3:22 p.m. incident to any stunt crew member during working hours. He went home at 7:30 p.m. He called Marcus Fong, a fellow stunt coordinator who had not been on set that day, at approximately 8:15 p.m. The conversation lasted 22 minutes. Fong documented it in a note he kept after unusual professional incidents, a habit he had maintained since 1968. Fong's notes from the call describe Alan Tang's account in direct terms. He said it wasn't the take that stayed with him. He said the take was fast and over. What stayed was the force measurement. He said he's been in the stunt business for 9 years. He knows what a kick does. He knows what a punch does. He knows what a throw does. He said what he saw at 3:22 was a deflection, a defensive move that redirected 215 pounds of momentum hard enough to put glass through the air at sufficient force to fracture bone at 7 feet of distance. He said he's been trying to think of another example from his career of a defensive technique producing that kind of secondary force. He told me he couldn't find one. That measurement, a defensive technique, not a strike, producing bone-fracturing secondary force at 7 feet, was the piece of information that made the incident different from other on-set incidents. Film sets experience injuries. They are common enough that productions carry medics and that the studio system has protocols for handling them. A stuntman gets hurt during a fall. It happens. A camera operator strains a back. It happens. A prop breaks badly and cuts someone. It happens. What the crew of Enter the Dragon processed on the evening of January 17, 1973 was different in kind, not just in degree, because the injury to Luke Chun Fan was not produced by Bruce Lee striking him. Bruce Lee never touched Luke Chun Fan. He never looked at him during the take. He was not aware of Luke's position in relation to the bottle's trajectory at the moment of interception. The injury was produced by physics. Bruce Lee applied a defensive interception to Bob Wall's charge. The force of that interception, transferred through Wall's arms, into the bottle, into the trajectory the bottle then followed, was sufficient to fracture a bone. Bruce Lee's defensive response to a real threat, in a real take with real glass, produced enough measurable force to break a bone in a man standing 7 feet away who was not the target of anything. Eddie Chung, 41, one of the lighting technicians on Stage 4, described his processing of this in a conversation documented by a documentary researcher in 1989. I kept asking myself the same question all evening. If that's what a deflection does, what does a direct strike do? I've seen the rehearsal footage. I've watched him work for 3 weeks. I thought I understood what I was watching. After 3:22 p.m., I wasn't sure I understood it at all. That recalibration, I thought I understood what I was watching and then I wasn't sure, appears in multiple accounts from the January 17th crew. It is the consistent through line of what the 8 seconds left behind. Not fear, not admiration in the conventional sense, something more precise than either of those. The recognition that the calibration they had been using to measure what they were seeing, the framework built on 14 years of watching trained athletes, stuntmen, martial artists, and fighters work on film sets, was insufficient for what Bruce Lee was doing. They had been watching him work for 3 weeks. They had seen the training footage. They had observed the rehearsals. They had been professional close-range witnesses to a level of physical skill that most of them acknowledged was exceptional, and then a deflection, not a strike, fractured a bone at 7 feet, and the framework bent. The crew did not speak about it extensively on January 17th. They worked through the afternoon. They wrapped at 7:45 p.m. They went home. But 3 separate crew members, independently on the same evening, made notes of some kind about what they had seen. Carol Fung in her production log, Marcus Fong in his incident notebook, and one other whose account would not surface until 15 years after the production wrapped. The most detailed written record of the 8 seconds that exists. That record begins with a single line, written in English in a small notebook, dated January 17, 1973. Today I saw what force actually looks like when it doesn't have a target. Enter the Dragon completed principal photography on February 2, 1973, 16 days after the Stage 4 incident. Luke Chun Fan did not return to the production. His fracture required 6 weeks of immobilization. By the time the cast and crew had completed the final day of shooting and the wrap party had been held in a restaurant on Kowloon side, he was 3 weeks into his recovery, attending follow-up appointments at Queen Mary Hospital on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. He received his production payment in full. His credit appeared in the film as originally contracted. The studio medical coverage handled his treatment costs without dispute. He never spoke publicly about January 17, 1973. Not in any documented interview, not in any martial arts publication, not in any of the several retrospective documentaries about Enter the Dragon that were produced in the decades following Bruce Lee's death. His silence was not unusual. Stuntmen and crew members in the Hong Kong film industry of the early 1970s operated in a professional culture that absorbed incidents without broadcasting them. You were hurt, you recovered, you returned to work. Discussing injuries was not standard professional behavior. It could be read as complaint, which was its own kind of professional liability. What Luke did do was change disciplines. He had been a primarily acrobatic stuntman before Enter the Dragon. His specialty was falls and high work rather than contact sequences. After his recovery, he transitioned fully to non-contact stunt work. He worked in Hong Kong cinema until 1981. In every production after 1973, he declined contact sequence assignments. Nobody who worked with him after 1973 was told why. Nobody asked directly. It was the kind of change that the industry absorbed without requiring explanation. Bob Wall flew back to Los Angeles in early February 1973. He had completed his role in the film, including the final shooting days of the O'Hara fight sequence, which was filmed on a different day from the January 17th incident, without broken glass, using choreography that had been revised after the injury. On the flight home, he sat next to a colleague from the American martial arts circuit, a man he had known since his competitive days in California. The colleague had not been on the Enter the Dragon production and had no knowledge of the January 17th incident. Wall told him about it during the flight. The account was documented secondhand. The colleague wrote it down in his own notes within 48 hours of landing in Los Angeles, as part of a practice he maintained of recording significant conversations. That document was shared with a martial arts historian in the mid-1990s and constitutes the most complete outside account of Wall's immediate interpretation of the event. Wall's description of the interception itself, the 2-arm trap, and the force it generated was technically precise. He was a martial artist. He understood the mechanics. He described the force transfer accurately. Momentum redirected through the object in his hands, converted into projectile velocity sufficient to produce the injury at 7 feet. He said one thing beyond the technical description that his colleague recorded verbatim. Bruce's defensive moves hit harder than most men's offense, and the scary part is he wasn't trying to hit anything. He was trying to protect himself. That sentence traveled. Wall's colleague shared it with 2 people in Los Angeles. Those 2 people shared it further. By mid-1973, it existed in the American martial arts community as a summary, not always attributed to Wall, not always attached to the specific incident, but circulating as a description of something that had happened on the Enter the Dragon set. Bruce Lee never commented on the January 17th incident publicly. He saw an early rough cut of Enter the Dragon at a private screening in Hong Kong in June 1973. He did not see the finished film. He died on July 20th, 1973, 32 years old, 6 weeks before the film's theatrical release. The film opened on August 19th, 1973. It earned $25 million in its first run in the United States alone. By the end of its international release, gross receipts exceeded $90 million, on a production budget of $850,000. It remains one of the most financially successful martial arts films in cinema history by return on investment. The O'Hara fight sequence and the sequence that January 17's seventh take was part of is in the film. The interception is in the film. The cut is at the precise moment that the interception connects. The shot changes immediately following contact to Wall's reaction, and then to the continuation of the fight. The bottle does not appear on camera after the interception. Luke Chun Fan's injury is not visible in the film. The 8 seconds of silence that followed the seventh take are not in the film. What is in the film is the take itself, or rather the first 8 frames of it from the point of contact to the cut. 1/3 of a second, all that survived the editing room from 7 takes and a 40-minute medical delay. The notebook entry that begins, "Today, I saw what force actually looks like when it doesn't have a target," was written by Carol Fung, the production assistant whose daily logs constituted the most consistent written record of the Enter the Dragon shoot. She kept the notebook until 1988, when she donated a collection of production materials to a Hong Kong film archive. The notebook was catalogued, but not digitized until 2019. The entry for January 17, 1973 is 4 paragraphs. The final paragraph reads, "I have been on film sets since 1969. I have seen accidents. I have seen injuries. I have seen things go wrong in ways that hurt people. None of them felt like this one. The others felt like failures of safety or timing or communication. This one felt like a demonstration, not something that went wrong, something that worked exactly as it was designed to work, and the design turned out to be larger than the container we had put it in." The container was a film set. The design was Bruce Lee, and 53 people on Stage 4 at Golden Harvest Studios on January 17, 1973, found out, in 8 seconds, without warning, without preparation, and without any category available to file it in afterward, just how large that design actually was. 8 seconds, nobody moved.